Hey there Dark and Darker fans, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the Cleric and how you might like to play them as a solo or group Cleric. We'll talk about the skills and abilities, we'll talk about playstyles, and we'll cover some of the equipment that you might like to consider over your base equipment. So let's jump straight into it. We're going to start with the solo Cleric. I consider the solo Cleric to always be a battle Cleric. You're going to be having a mixture of melee, some ranged magical damage. You're going to be kind of tanky. You're going to have self buffs. You're going to be very self-sufficient. We're going to start with the spells first because they dictate they dictate which perks you might want to take. We'll get rid of these ones and start from the beginning, start fresh so you can see why we've made these choices. Protection, it takes 1 spell memory, creates a shield that blocks 20 physical damage for 20 seconds. Heck yeah. In any PvP scenario, this is good. Against PvE, this is great. If you're in goblin caves and you're coming up against a goblin with a bow or a sling, pop this on. You can tank 1 shot for free and then drop that goblin before they shoot a second time. Amazing. Bless, I like it. 3 strength, agility, and will. Those are the combat stats. You're going to be hitting harder, you're going to be hitting faster, you're moving faster. Your spells do more damage, and you take less spell damage. Sounds great to me. Cleanse, I think there is use case for taking Cleanse. It's not my favorite because it's not always useful, so I'm going to hold off on that and see where we end up with our spell memory and what we can fit into these 3 slots. Lesser Heal heals a target for 15 health. This is the only heal that the Cleric can take which they can cast on themselves, so I think this is a slam dunk in my opinion. This is 60 health worth of heals, minimum. There are ways to make this even higher. This is going to save you so much on potions and bandages, especially as a level 1 Cleric. My goodness, take lesser heal, it is so good. Divine Strike, grant the target 5 additional weapon damage for 20 seconds. Cast on self. I think that is an amazing extra buff. If you've already got Bless on, you've got Divine Strike on, you're going to be hitting pretty hard at that point for that next 20 seconds. So if you detect PvP is coming, you're just casting Divine Strike, Protection, Bless on yourself, and you're getting in there and taking advantage of that extra power that you have. Bind, as a solo Cleric, I think you could take it. It's going to stop people from chasing you briefly. It allows you to chase people who are faster than you. As a Cleric, you move slowly and you don't really have a gap closer, so you could make an argument for Bind. But I think it's not my style of spell, so I tend to not take it. Holy Strike hits all targets within range, dealing 15 damage and blinding them. Yeah, I think this is the choice. There's a lot of footsies that happens in Dark and Darker when you get into PvP combat. You know, that initial engagement can falter a bit because people are trying to get the first strike in without allowing themselves to be hit in return by their opponent. So as this footsies game is going on, you can just whip out the Holy Strike and start getting in some free damage. And if you augment that with some of the other skills that you can take, I think there is a lot of merit in taking Holy Strike, so that's what I would choose. Let's just briefly look at the other spells to cover why we might or might not take them. Holy Light heals an ally for 30 HP. Well, you're not going to be healing any allies because you are playing as a solo, so already you're probably not going to take this. Or does 100 base magical damage to an undead target. If you're playing solo Cleric, you're likely in the Goblin Caves. There are some undead targets in there, but there's just not enough, I think, to merit taking Holy Light as a damage spell. Additionally, when you try and rest and get back more charges for Holy Light, it takes a long time. So I think there's just no merit to be taking Holy Light as a solo Cleric. And then this just gets more true for the rest of these spells. Sanctuary, very good spell. However, we actually just can't take it. We're going to be over on our spell memory. If you have some knowledge gear, maybe you could take something like Sanctuary. It is very good. It heals yourself. And dealing damage, it could be useful in some cases, but You're going to use it mostly for the heal. So if you have the knowledge, you could take it. But I think Holy Strike is actually just good enough anyways. I don't know if I would even switch those out if I had the extra knowledge. Locust Swarm and Earthquake. Again, if you have the knowledge, I think these could be good, especially if you take out Holy Strike. I think I would always keep these cheaper spells. They're kind of just the meat and potatoes of the solo Battle Cleric. And that's why I'm focusing on taking Holy Strike off and on, is that's the one spell that could be taken out and you could use something else. Resurrection, you're definitely not going to be taking, because there's no point to resurrect your non-existent teammates. Alright, now let's talk about perks. As the solo Battle Cleric, you're going to want to be tanky, you're going to want to be able to do damage, and you're going to want to be able to be self-sufficient. That's why Advanced Healer is so great. Remember that we've got that lesser heal. It heals for 15. Well, now it heals for 20. So this perk is if you're going to use all 4 of your heal charges. 4 times 5, it's already worth 20 HP. Lesser heal actually comes back fairly quickly while resting as well. So you're probably able to get 5 or 6 heals in any dungeon with just a little bit of resting. So I think Advanced Healer is a slam dunk. Holy Aura, increase the armor rating and magic resistance of yourself and all nearby party members by 15. Just an always on be tankier perk I think is good. There's just nothing to dislike about it, and I think, as you'll see in a second, there's not enough merit to take any other perks. I think Holy Aura is a very solid choice. Blunt Weapon Mastery, you're just doing 10% more damage with blunt weapons. I think the cleric can only take blunt weapons, so don't worry about if that mace or that quarterstaff is a blunt weapon. I do believe they all are. And Perseverance, this is probably the only one that is a for sure 100% take, while the other ones I think are about 90%. But Perseverance is, you take it, because it's the thing that sort of makes you tanky. Reducing all incoming damage by 3 is huge, especially for things like damage over time, which typically do less damage, but more often. So, Perseverance, you take it, and you're suddenly kind of half tanky. Brewmaster, it's a bit memey. There were people playing it during the playtest, but I haven't seen a single person use it during early access. You could take it if you want to do the memes and make a YouTube video, but for a real build, probably not. Kindness, you are not healing any other targets, so this 15% bonus back to yourself, it's never going to happen, so don't take Kindness. Protection from Evil, I think you could take Protection from Evil, and it's good. It reduces the duration of slows against you, reduces duration of dots, and that's really good. It just automatically happens. You don't have to cleanse yourself. So I think Protection from Evil is good. You could take that over Holy Aura. It's up to you. Requiem, resurrecting an ally. Stop there. We don't have any allies. We don't take Requiem. Undead Slain. If you're mostly in the Goblin Caves, there's not enough undead to be slain to merit taking a 20% extra physical damage bonus, so we're not going to consider that. Aside from Protection from Evil, you're sort of just left with these 4 perks being fairly obvious and fairly good, so that's kind of a slam dunk in my opinion if you're the solo Battle Cleric. For the skills, you're going to take that Spell Memory. If you don't take Spell Memory, all of these spells that we took you can't use, so that's taking 1 slot for sure. Your other skill slot, I think Judgment is super great. It is sort of the original, if you're a cleric, you take this spell because it's good. It's really good against rogues because they have a very low will score. So if a rogue jumps on you, you Judgment, you bonk them in the head once, they're done. It's that good. In combination with your Holy Strike, you can actually dish out a fair amount of range damage. The other skills, Divine Protection, I don't think it's good enough as a solo player. It can be good if you time it right, but I think you're already casting a lot of other spells which increase your tankiness. So do you need to be even more tanky? I don't know. I think the cleric needs to do more damage, which is why I like Judgment. over something like Divine Protection. Holy Purification deals damage to undead monsters. Again, you're probably in Goblin Caves, so I don't think you're going to be able to take advantage of this as a solo cleric. At least not in a way that would make it worth it. I think Judgment is just better. Smite, however, I could see someone taking Smite. I think you probably could get off 3 hits or so against an enemy within 7 seconds. So an extra 30 magic damage. That's not bad. The thing with Judgment, though, is it's ranged. It's got a slow on it. I think it's just going to be doing more often. If you like the idea of Smite, I think taking it is totally fine. But I do prefer the Judgment playstyle. For gear, I think you're going to want to drop that mace and shield as a solo player and pick up the quarterstaff in particular. I think there's just nothing to not like about the quarterstaff. You hold down mouse 1 and it turns into a windmill of doom and you just walk towards your opponent. Or if they're coming into you, you just hold down mouse 1 and they're likely going to get hit before you do. Yeah, take the quarterstaff. Give it a try if you haven't. It is so good. And take as much plate gear as you feel comfortable trading for movement speed. If you take too much plate gear, you are so slow as a cleric, and suddenly your tankiness, I don't know if it becomes worth it, because you're so easy to hit, and you can't punish players for their mistakes or for coming in close to hit you. They can almost treat you like a PvE mob, and come in for a strike, and then back out while you try to retaliate, and then come in again. Or if it's a ranger that has a good bow and he's landing shots on you, it's impossible for you to close that distance. I think the plate hat is a must-take because of the headshot damage reduction and because of the projectile reduction. That's a really good one too. I would say take the best or the most armor you can get on your chest, but then for your 3 remaining slots for armor, I would probably go pretty light on these. These are just in here because they happen to be what I had. I'd actually probably take the riveted gloves here. Plate boots, I like the strength on them as well. And then keep the pants maybe a bit on the light side in order to retain movement speed. For casting spells, I do appreciate the spellbook. The magic staff it's cumbersome. I find you end up hitting walls and ceilings and things like that when you try and cast spells, especially in clutch moments. If you can afford it, bring a spellbook. It even makes your Judgment do a bit more damage if you have it out, so a little extra bonus there and just quality of life. And that's the solo cleric. Now let's talk about the group cleric. As a group cleric, you are able to engage in a few different playstyles, and it depends on the needs of your group. Let's talk about the battle cleric first, and this is sort of the tanky frontliner that is very similar in build to the solo cleric. Let's start with the spells, because they kind of change a little bit now that you're in a group, and we'll go through all the spells once again. Protection, yeah, it only costs 1 spell memory, and it's good. Bless, I like it. It used to be better. I think it used to be 5 strength, agility, and will, but again, it costs 1. It makes you or any group member just that much stronger. I think it's just good. Cleanse, I think you could use it. I don't necessarily like it. And again, we'll sort of just move on from here and see what slots and how much spell memory we have left. Lesser heal, yeah, you take it. It is so good. And on that note, before we get too far, let's just take Holy Light. It is suddenly very, very good when you are in a party. And there's a few perks that make it even better. Being able to heal allies for 30 HP, that is a ton. You know, two of these, and they're back to full life in most cases. There's a lot less downtime in the party when you can just cast spells like this, and it's great during combat. Even if you're that tanky front line, there's going to be cases and situations where you're just going to need to heal parties, and that is your job as a cleric, so don't ever forget that. That leaves us with just 2 spell memory without any additional knowledge, so you just take Cleanse and you call it a day. Cleanse can be useful in certain situations, so it's not just like it's wasting a slot. If you have a bit of knowledge, I think there's arguments to be had for Bind or Divine Strike. I think there's They're not good in every situation, but they're good enough in most situations that if you just had that extra knowledge, I could take them over cleanse. That would be very, very valid. Let's just briefly cover the rest of the spells. Holy Strike, I don't think you're going to be using that if you are kind of the frontliner as a cleric, and if you're up against a group of 3, dealing 15 damage isn't as good as it is in solo. Sanctuary is actually amazing, heals allies, does some damage. I think it is a very cool, very good spell if you could afford to take it. That's the unfortunate thing. It's a very high tier, it takes 6 spell memory when you've only got 12. Is it good enough for you to spend half of your spell memory on that? Maybe with some extra knowledge gear and you get more memory. It's going to be up to you though. This is a personal preference pick for sure. Same thing with Locust Storm and Earthquake. They could be good. You're not going to be kind of casting them too often though as a battle cleric. So if you like it, maybe take them, but I wouldn't recommend it. Resurrection suddenly becomes very good in a group. However, it costs 8. I think there is a situation where you do something like this with a bit of knowledge gear. You take Resurrection, Lesser Heal, Bless, Protection. That sounds pretty good. Maybe you could even get rid of Bless and go for something like Holy Light, Resurrection, and you take out everything else. I don't know. I personally don't think I would take Resurrection, and I'd stick with the tried and true standard cleric combo of these spells. For perks, it's going to be a lot like the solo cleric. Advanced healer, it's now even better because you probably have Holy Light and Lesser Heal. Holy Aura, it's even better because you're buffing group members now. Blunt Weapon Mastery, I think you could argue is probably the least concern. Doing 10% extra damage in a group setting, it's good. There's nothing wrong with it, but let's see if there's something better. You're definitely taking Perseverance if you are the front line of the group. Alright, what would we take instead of Blunt? Brewmaster, no. Kindness? Well, actually maybe. Because we now have 2 heals, suddenly Kindness becomes a lot better. I don't know if you're the front line, do you need to have Kindness? I think you could argue no, and taking Blunt Weapon Mastery is definitely fine. But it's a consideration. Protection from Evil, I think you could also take instead of, even maybe Holy Aura. I think these 2 slots are probably where you're going to find the most flexibility. Protection from Evil is good. I'd say this is probably the tankiest build right here. If you wanted to fill out again for a bit more healing, depending on your group composition, Kindness is good. If you want more damage, Blunt Weapon Mastery is good. And that's going to be up to you. Undead Slaying, it's just not happening often enough unless you're going to hell, and even then, is it worth it? You're likely going to have other damage dealers in your group who are doing the damage that you need to do what you want to do. I could see you taking this if you were in High Roller Hell and you all needed to be doing great damage, but that's a very specific use case scenario. Judgment, it's super great. That 20% snare helps you catch people, helps your group catch someone. It does some extra damage from range. I think it is just fine to take as a group battle cleric. You're of course going to need spell memory in order to use your spells. Let's talk about Divine Protection in particular, because I think this is actually a very good one. If you know that you're going to run in there as the cleric and have a lot of damage directed to you, having a 30% reduction in physical damage is pretty darn good. It would be nice if it was magic as well, but likely 2 out of 3 of the enemy group members are going to be doing physical damage at minimum, so very good. I think you could take it and be fine with that. Holy Purification, if your goal is to get to hell, I would take it. If not, I wouldn't. Smite, it's good. If your party needs more damage, I would take it. Maybe, although I still like Judgment better. If your party needs the tankiness, I would take Divine Protection. Up to you. And I think Cleric is, yeah, one of the few classes where you could actually take any of the skills available, depending on the situation your group finds itself in. As a group Battle Cleric, I think I recommend taking the shield and the mace as opposed to the quarterstaff or the war maul. The war maul has its issues, and the quarterstaff, I think it does decent damage, but I don't know if it's good enough damage to merit taking it as a two-hander. The mace is a very good headshot weapon. It swings from over top, over your own shoulder, right in front of you, and it goes over shields. It's just very, very good at hitting heads, so it's doing fine damage anyways. And if you get a good shield, you're able to hold that up in PvE situations, maybe in PvP too, if you're very good at it. And you're going to get a lot more use of having the utility out of a shield than just having a two-hander as a group Battle Cleric. You're going to be taking the tankiest gear that you can find, probably full plate. Although again, if stats come up on something like a Regal Gambison, totally you can take that as well, and it's still pretty tanky. You will be sacrificing a lot of move speed, but that's okay. Oftentimes people come to you, and if you're chasing someone, you might have something like a ranger behind you who can catch them or use their bow from a range anyways. So losing the movement speed as sort of the tank of the group isn't so bad. Alright, so let's talk about the buff cleric, or the support cleric. Realistically, you're just going to be taking these same spells anyways. You could take Divine Strike because you're going to be focusing on casting spells, and just throwing in more damage on your group mates is pretty cool. You need that one extra spell memory in order to get it, but that's fairly easy to do. Cleanse can be good, for sure, but you can usually just throw out heals. If something that was doing like dot damage could have been cleansed, well, you can just save with a heal, or throw on a protection if it's doing physical damage. Cleanse is good, not 100% necessary. Bind, it's good. It's good, but I think there are better spells, such as the ones we've already taken. Holy Strike, you could argue for it, but I think you're taking out some fairly good defensive spells if you're doing that. Sanctuary, Locust Swarm, Earthquake, Resurrection, we talked about these. They're just too expensive, and I think you're going to find yourself wishing you had these spells to use while someone's alive before needing to resurrect your teammates. For your perks as a support cleric, Advanced Healer, always, yep. Holy Aura, I mean, it's just good. Your teammates are going to be taking less damage, that's great. I think Protection from Evil is maybe the one that could be changed into something else, but Perseverance is always going to be a pick as a cleric. It just makes you that little bit more tanky, especially if a rogue jumps on you. That final spell that we're going to take is probably Kindness, because you've got a couple heal spells. You want to be able to throw out some heals on your teammates, and you sort of just passively heal as a result. It's a lot more value for healing, and I think as a support cleric, this is kind of a must-take, and there's nothing else that's sort of really good enough anyways. These four perks are great. For the skills, Divine Protection you could say is good. However, it depends on your communication as a group. If your fighter's like, I want to go in, okay, you say, I've got Divine Protection, here it comes, boom. Now get in there. If you can time it really well, that 4 seconds can be used to great effect. However, that's a very small window. If you're playing in a group that's not as precise with communication, I don't think it's as worth taking, although it's very good. I'd probably, again, stick with Judgment as the default if you're just looking to play and get kills and see how things go. Holy Purification, if you're going to Hell or you have high roller loot runs, yeah, it's very good for that. And you're probably not going to be taking Smite because you're probably going to be in the back line healing and casting spells. So that's probably not a pick. Let's talk about your gear as a support cleric. I love the spellbook for casting spells. I think it is the best for not interacting with the dungeon, like the physical dungeon around you. The staff, I find it hits ceilings, it hits walls, it hits other things and the spells get cancelled too often, the spellbook is the best by far. I would drop the quarterstaff and go with the mace and shield combo. That's partly because you can just get more bonuses this way, but also sometimes just holding up a shield while your teammate wails on the rogue that's trying to hit you, or if your team doesn't have a shield to hold up and you're fighting some PvE, you can just do that and be sort of a pseudo tanky character very briefly when you have this available. And the mace is just great for bopping heads. It's got a very good attack pattern for doing that, from swinging over your shoulder, coming down over top of shields. It's a nice way to get in some extra damage, and it's very predictably placed, so you're not swinging into teammates and doing team damage. A very fine choice. You're going to probably value movement speed a bit more than tankiness. Like, even just putting on your frock, we get another, 5% movement speed there. Or 4, sorry. Having some armor and like that headshot damage reduction is good, but I think you're not going to be as tanky in some cases. However, you're probably just throwing on your most powerful piece of gear and not worrying about it. And I think that's it for the group buff cleric. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you would like to be notified when another video like this comes out, please consider subscribing. Always appreciate any likes or subscriptions. Thanks in advance, and we'll see you guys again soon in the dungeon.